This is MAEKAN It Up, a weekly culture news podcast focused on analyzing and debating whatever comes up of interest in creative culture, brought to you by MAEKAN. I'm Charisse Poon, and my co-host is Eugene Kan. The format of this podcast is a light catch-up, and then two main items of news, one chosen by Eugene and one chosen by myself.
So we pick our topics from the MAEKAN Briefing, which is an email newsletter we send out twice a week, filled with current news, interesting links, and more analysis of culture. On MAEKAN It Up, we talk through the things we're most interested in and try to come to some sort of it's the first time reading it. On MAEKAN It Up, we talk through the things we're most interested in and try to come to some kind of conclusion on the state of culture, media, tech, food, whatever it may be in our modern times.
You can reread it at the end if that will make you feel better.
I'm going to keep it. And I'll let people know that I fucked it up too. Might as well.
I write you scripts and then you just want to ignore them.
All right. How often do you think you make new friends in Hong Kong?
Define.
Use whatever sort of definition you want to use.
If we're talking lasting friendships, then I'll probably only make a new friend every 6 months. That already seems like overkill because I've been in Hong Kong 5 years. That means I've made 10
I think regardless
new
of the
friends.
city, I wonder if that number increases or diminishes in different cities around the world.
That's an interesting question. I mean, when you first move, you make a lot of friends. You meet a lot of people.
Or you don't.
In what situation would you not?
I think that's very conditionally dependent.
I assume that, okay, for me, personally.
When I was you working a job that doesn't provide you the opportunity to meet a bunch of different people.
So obviously when I moved to Hong Kong and then I started working at Hypebeast, I immediately gained many new friends at once.
That is not the norm. Because think about it, you share a common interest with all these people around the same age as you.
That's true.
Imagine if you're in banking.
First of all, if I was trying to imagine that I was in banking, I'd have a hard time imagining all of these other extraneous things besides the fact that I wouldn't be making friends.
Well, no, let's use this example. How many people did you hang out from your Dragon Boat team?
As in outside of the actual sport?
Yeah.
Maybe 5?
So they are friends.
They're friends.
Okay, just checking.
5 is a pretty good number.
Yeah, 5 is a lot, I'd say.
Yeah, 5 is a lot. How many of your footy friends do you hang out with? Do you have friends?
I don't hang out with any of them outside of
Do they listen to
footy.
this podcast?
I don't think so.
Okay. You're safe. You should use a coaster.
Hold on a second. Dejectedly throws down headphones.
What conversation did you have last week with a person whose first name I don't think I can pronounce?
I'm going to go with Bezod. And no, you know what's interesting? I was looking back on it and as I was cutting last week's podcast, I was like actually a little bit uncomfortable. I was like, man, do I even really know what I'm talking about?
When we were talking about Jay-Z?
Yeah. I was like, I felt like all the ideas were there, but I couldn't put the best foot forward. But then I realized, hey, this is kind of a good thing because it is sort of the premise behind MAEKAN It Up where you're kind of trying to figure stuff out on the spot. Maybe it's also a reflection of not being properly prepared, but ultimately, like, I think that, and this is kind of weird. I feel like every week I go into this sort of like deep existential thing, but it's like,
every week, that's you every day.
I feel like it's good to be like embarrassed more often than not and like be okay with that feeling of not being in the best light, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's a good attribute. And I sort of brought this up with you, but Stanley was telling me that I needed to be more open-minded because we got into a very heated discussion where apparently I wasn't open to being wrong. You don't have to frame it as embarrassment. It's okay to be wrong in public, which is what this podcast is.
I think that's something that I've really thought about more recently. Every so often, like we'll talk about like psychedelics and like through an article, whatever we put in the briefing, the underlying mechanism behind that is sort of to unbreak bonds, right?
Yeah, to be uninhibited.
Yes. And I think that's why it's good to just put yourself out there and not always feel as though everything needs to be perfect. There's certain times when you're doing something and you feel as though you've made a big mistake or you're not doing a good job or you're not sure where to go, like trajectory-wise. And I think most people kind of get really caught up in that. And I mean, I do too, right? Like you're like, oh man, I feel like I'm not moving as fast as I should, or I wish I was further faster. It also is kind of reinforced by social media. Well, it's not. It is reinforced, right? Like we only really ever see your best foot forward. At the end of the day, sometimes you just need to like understand where you are within the bigger picture versus like where you are zoomed in. But I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
I mean, you think about a lot of things.
I do think about a lot of things. What else did I have to talk about? Oh man, we totally got sidetracked. So
no, that's not sidetracked because that is
because the Jay-Z thing, I think whatever I felt was sort of the angle or perspective I wanted to take. Bezod basically came in and like dropped the mic on my behalf.
On the MAEKAN Slack.
Yeah. Can you read his comment? It's in the fashion footwear section. Scroll up.
Yes. He said, so you shared the link and you just asked, what are all your thoughts on this? And then he said, let's start with how wide of a role a creative director actually is in practice, then compound that with the fact that Jay has a fair number of competing priorities. I have all sorts of questions and concerns. What will he actually do? How much time and headspace will be spent on Puma? Even if he has some magical vision, how quickly can Puma mobilize? Even if they are successful in creating that, how well will it be received? People only have so much time, attention, and money. Where are we taking from to give this to Puma? Consider me highly skeptical. Yes, I agree that this is well written, but the difference between us doing this podcast and someone commenting in Slack is that they have more time to think and write their thoughts.
Hey, maybe that was a one taker.
Just spitballing.
Maybe that was a one taker.
That's true. We don't know. I'm just trying to.
But everything he said there were things that I felt strongly about. Not to steal his thunder, but like things I couldn't articulate.
I mean, he didn't hear the podcast when he said that, but actually, I can attest that his questions are similar to yours. But I get what you're saying, that at the time during the episode, you were not quite able to put it in these exact words.
I was happy that I at least ended up somewhere.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up another digital conversation I had with someone familiar with MAEKAN. Craig Maud on Twitter had an exchange with me about the Hinoki story. And it was kind of revealing, this is a bit of a UX UI discussion. It's kind of revealing to me what some users might perceive of our site. And I forget that because we obviously use the site every day and stare at it every day. Yeah. So we forget that maybe some things are not obvious.
I can also share a little anecdote after you're done.
Yeah. And so he thought that our Hinoki story was really short because he only looked at the text blurb and didn't hit play. And he made the assumption that the audio was a direct reflection of the text, which I can understand because nowhere does it say
and
it's
also
not.
That's how you usually see sound bars.
Yes, exactly. And we don't have any indicator of how long the audio is.
Yeah.
So he thought it was like a 250 word piece, which admittedly would have been very strange when in actuality it's a 20-minute audio story.
If you look at the experience within MAEKAN, actually it's virtually unchanged from the first prototype, which is going on like probably 2 or 3 years now. So, shout outs to good old Justin Gorman, BK, Tim, Zach, like all those guys put in some amazing work. Audio was never meant to be part of the original experience. It was more like a module. It's been punching above its weight or been utilized in a way that maybe wasn't necessarily meant to be its actual application. So
yeah, I understand.
That's definitely something we're changing, and it's nice. It's kind of interesting this gets brought up because we're hoping to relaunch something new upcoming. Well, I say that with such a lackluster voice.
Well, I think it's not exciting yet to us because we're not quite at...
We can never get excited about anything.
I don't think that's true.
Okay, anyways.
I think we get excited about stuff. You get excited about very little. On the topic of things that you get excited about, I think I get the most excited about stories that I publish on people who I want to support, who I'm keen on. And that happened yesterday because I finally published our story about Waigion, which is Takuma Inoue's project in Kyoto that supports local culture and holds really interesting multicultural events and is looking for tenants that buy into this idea of fostering Kyoto creatives. So that gets me excited more than the fact that we're launching a new site.
So what's interesting is that the backstory behind how Takuma and I met was pretty random. I think I've actually told this story before, but...
On this podcast?
Might have. I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with Sarah's story.
No, okay.
Yeah. I was in Kyoto just on a vacation, and I was just like randomly updating my Instagram story, something I actually don't really do all that often. I usually do it more when I'm traveling, to be honest. And I just get this random message, and I was like, this guy's like, hey, how's it going? I saw you're in Kyoto. Do you want to meet up? And I mean, it's kind of random to have someone hit you up and meet them up.
I'm not that surprised that this happens to you, though.
Anyways, it happened. So we
met up.
This
is not the only time this has happened to you in your life.
So we met up later that night at this bar called Sour, which he helped design, which does these fruit chuhais.
Which we just talked about last episode.
Yeah, this is weird. Anyways, yeah, so met up, and fast forward, he was one of the reasons why Sour did a pop-up at Yardbird, and now there's talk of something going on in Kyoto with Yardbird. So it's all sort of this full circle thing.
Yeah.
And it's just random because I decided to meet somebody on like a 2 hours notice.
It's really cool.
I've stopped getting excited about places, but I do get really excited about people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
I think so.
Places like travel doesn't really excite me anymore. It's more the people and their stories and the culture that they can hopefully share.
Gets me excited too.
You don't sound excited.
Do I not?
We're hella low energy today. Maybe because I just had lunch.
I don't think I'm low. Maybe I am. There's construction in the flat above me, so that's what I woke up to.
Okay, I'll go first. My topic this week talks about Grailed and how it just raised $15 million in investment money. So the New York Times article highlights Grailed kind of from a back-end standpoint of who they are, what they do, and just the general sort of state of affairs of Grailed. If you're unfamiliar with Grailed, in the words of the New York Times, it's a platform for buying, selling, and swapping clothing and accessories. It was originally created in 2013 by Arun Gupta, Jake Metzer, and Julian Connor. So I think the way some people have described it is like a more hyped eBay, in a way.
And the article goes into this, it is a sleeker way to get the things done that were previously happening in forums where people were swapping items anyway.
Yeah.
And this is a central gathering place.
Yes.
With some measures of security and
I can get into that later. Yeah. I mean, so the underlying sort of business mechanism for Grailed is they charge a 6% commission on sales between members, not including PayPal fees. So it's actually quite expensive in the grand scheme of things.
The items are expensive too. Like the items that Grailed is interested in featuring and that consumers usually go to Grailed to find.
Let me get to that. So all the listings are user generated. So you have sort of this wide gamut of quality in terms of photography, descriptions, etc. And arguably this is part of its weakness. I mean, there's a ton of listings, but sometimes there's a lot of questionable is not really the word. I think there's a lot of things that get people a little bit.
Well, so are all things that are user generated because you can't control the masses. It is what it is.
Yeah. So like everything from fulfillment to authenticity is kind of left in the hands of people that are making the transaction, right? So people complain about the cost of shipping being too high, which arguably is sort of built in by sellers because they're always sort of like prepared to get lowballed, which is another part of the whole Grailed experience. Also, authenticity kind of falls into the hands of admins who, I mean, you're kind of going off photo references, right? You can't really see the product in real life. From what I gather, it hasn't really been all that good of an experience for certain people.
I've never used it.
I've never used it, but I've always been aware of it.
I have been aware of it for a while since its inception, which is fairly young.
It feels kind of weird for me to talk too specifically about its sort of downfalls. What's interesting is I've been having this sort of side dialogue in the MAEKAN Slack community with Cody S. And he's a really big fan of Visvim. And what's interesting is that for him, Grailed has provided him sort of this ability to preserve his investment. So what that means is that like the resale value of Visvim, for example, maybe it's just by virtue of the brand also having a lot of brand value. So it might also be by virtue of the fact that Visvim tends to keep its value quite well. What it allows you to do is to obviously invest in a Visvim piece And if you want to sell it down the line, it generally holds its value. As I was hearing him explain it, it sounds a lot like the watch world, where there's certain watches where you could wear it for a year and there's a marginal drop, maybe even an increase in price. So I think that's really interesting. But beyond that, being that sort of a positive use case, I'm interested to see what this means for, I guess, the future of fashion in a way, because despite the fact there are a lot of like high-end items on the site, I feel as though there's like a representation only at the extremities. So what that means is that like it's either really expensive items that are just there, hoping like someone will buy them, or things are continually slashed and marked down. Like if you go on the site, like some things get marked down like 4 times, right? And I think that is cause for concern. There's a piece that Style Zeitgeist Eugene Rabkin wrote, I think it was 2016, and he just talks about how it undermines the sort of connection between a buyer and a brand/designer. So basically, like, you know, you've taken everything from, you know, let's say it's a high profile designer. You've basically reduced it to, you know, almost like bottom of the bin, like discount.
Got it. Actually, what's interesting to me is totally different from what's interesting to you. One thing that's interesting to me about Grailed is that I know this is not exactly in their mission, but it is a bit of a environmental cause because it's keeping a pool of products circulating as opposed to generating new products, right? Like it supports that. It doesn't stop new products from appearing, but it supports an ecosystem where people are resharing existing things. So, which I think is a good thing, you know, and obviously other sites do this, but I think having more places where there's that infrastructure and that mentality is healthy for all of us as consumers. And the thing that is interesting to me about this piece, which is the thing that it started with, is that it closed $15 million and that it's 37 employees, which both things were slightly surprising to me. Like the scale, first of all, that they have that big of a team running the site. Like I didn't think that was evident to me. And
is that a knock on them or just a neutral comment? I think they invest a lot in editorial, but I mean, that is something that doesn't necessarily.
I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a knock, but there are obviously elements of this that are like a store side. So employees could include, you know, things like handling products and verification. And it's not all jobs like editorial and technical, right? Which like, I just don't think you need that big of a technical team. And
that I can't comment on. But
anyway, this is my personal judge. All I can say is like, I didn't expect them to be that big or to be able to raise that much money. So I don't know what it says exactly about fashion, but there are definitely a lot of people who are willing to bet on this.
I didn't really want to take it to this kind of point in the conversation or focus too much on it, but there's sort of these shortcomings within Grailed, and I'm curious if money is a solution to them. So these problems include like, perpetual lowballing, like just the general community now, the types of people that are frequenting the site and the sort of perspective people are placing within. So like I recently joined Jeremy Kirkland's Blamo Slack community, and people were actually curious about creating sort of a buy-sell channel. And people were kind of lamenting why Grailed wasn't really working for them.
Well, I don't know. I think this is indicative of the culture at large because I think Grailed, and this is slightly addressed in the article, will inevitably attract a subsection of people that are not wholesome, not...
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like they...
Yeah. So like, I guess
now I'm the one at loss for words, but I just understand that Grailed being what it is about streetwear, buy, sell, swapping is going to attract these people that that I personally would not want to interact with.
I mean, the two things that are sort of glaring are, I'm sure there's more, but the ones that I've sort of, through my research, have sort of garnered is that the lowballing element of it. And I think the quality of people buying.
I think what the money can solve is in human resources. So having community managers that are very on top of things, that are willing to stop inappropriate behavior or behavior that is unhealthy.
But that's
to
kind
the marketplace.
But what is like? How do you do that? Is it like, oh, you know what?
You actually go in and police every individual user. That's what it is.
Based on lowballing? That you can't really do that. How can you put? I mean, you could put in like a structure where, hey, you know what? You can't lowball for more than.
Why can you not? Why can't you?
You wouldn't even need. I mean, you just.
You can strongly discourage. It's your platform. It's not like a public service.
Yeah, but
it's your platform. You can say you've been doing XYZ on X number of products over time, and we see this as malicious intent. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think so. I don't think, because think about it, all you would need to do, and it would fundamentally change the market dynamics, is that like, hey, if I post something for $100 and like, it would be almost an easy fix where I will not accept anything less than this. It's almost, maybe it's even just a best offer thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's less of an issue, because that actually was one of the things I wanted to bring up, because I don't think money really solves that, because there's probably ways of fixing that. Well,
again, I think what the money solves is having people who enforce rules.
But lowballing is not really a rule. Like, it's not really like an infringement.
There must,
because no one really knows. Like, how do I, if I have something that's, you know, $500 and I offer you $100 for it, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's really a violation of rules, because this is like, you're basically facilitating an interaction.
Okay, but fine. Maybe rule is too hard line, but I still think that it could be possible to have humans involved in mediating these relationships. Because you're saying, what it sounds to me like you are saying is that there's no way to fix this problem.
I think there's ways to fix it, but I don't think it's the biggest issue within it.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why, like, I think that to me was like just kind of running through the laundry list.
Okay. Continue.
But I think the other one that's probably the more glaring one is like authenticity of products, because like I've heard people say that they made 2 deals and they got chargebacks because people said it wasn't authentic. This is going to be very challenging because this never runs through the hands of Grailed, right? So there's no authenticity team.
Sorry, I'm not entirely clear about the details of this transaction. So a reputable seller sold authentic products that you know are authentic, and then the consumer said they're not and sent them back?
And I think they just went through buyer protection.
What does that mean?
So basically like, oh, if you buy something and either you don't receive the item or the item you received is significantly not as described, you can get your money back.
But I feel like, wouldn't the solution to this be similar to how eBay and Amazon and all of these other marketplaces work, where you review buyers and consumers.
Yeah.
And eventually this will weed out bad players. Basically. It's not unsolvable.
It's not unsolvable, but then it's just like, it's like a throwaway account. You could always do that, right? I guess what they lack right now is maybe a sort of friction point to create a level of accreditation.
Got it.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, what's different in a Grailed sort of element versus like, let's say StockX or like Goat, is that the product runs through their hands.
Got it.
So there's authenticity there that's associated with it.
Got it. I don't know how I wound up in this position where I feel like I'm now defending Grailed, which I have no stake in. But it seems like you are just very down on it.
I'm not down. I'm just interested to see how they'll solve those challenges, because I think there are fundamental issues that exist. And I think you know for a fact that luxury has always needed to combat authenticity of its product for the sake of business and for the sake of brand equity. So what role will Grailed play? I mean, I'm also very interested in Eugene Rabkin's argument that it's basically a race to the bottom and things.
Who is Eugene Rabkin?
Styles,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting argument in itself.
Right.
I that's the thing, is I'm trying to find a balanced perspective on this, where some people find a lot of value because it allows them to offload product that, you know, they wanted to quote unquote test drive. You might be able to try out things.
What would you say is the main appeal of Grailed to a regular person, not you personally?
I think that it's the ability for you to continually rotate your wardrobe and to have an outlet for it. And the fact I use the word outlet is probably subconscious.
Did you read what one of the partners at Index Ventures said? It kind of strikes me as a strange thing to say.
Is it about how people want connection with their clothing?
Yeah. So he says the reason Grailed has done so well and grown organically is that there's this incredible need by millennials in particular to connect themselves with these cult items of clothing. You see it in the way that the community responds to what they're doing. Really what we want to do is recognize that.
Or is it the fact that it's cheap? I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I also just find it strange because in this statement from the investor, it read to me like we recognize that millennials are all over this and we want to get a piece of that.
Yeah, maybe.
Like it doesn't read to me as community building or culture supportive.
But I mean, I do really enjoy the editorial side of Grailed when it does come across my table. Like I don't seek it out, but when I do see it, I think they have a pretty good grasp of how they can tell stories within fashion. But what's interesting too is that like, you know, this also falls back upon what was sort of addressed in the outlier story we did. Right now, fashion is generally speaking more about individualized product versus building worlds. So worlds inherently have a story, right?
Yeah.
So what does it mean if, like, let's say, just making this up, the last 5 years for the next forever indefinite period of time, there are no real sort of stories being told or worlds being built. It's more like a hyped product.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, like, what story you can tell? But I mean, at the end of the day, like, Grailed definitely has like a purpose and a need. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think people are going to find value there. I'm just curious.
I mean, because it is a solution to a problem that was existing. That's why it's necessary.
Yeah.
Until someone comes along and does it better.
Which I think there are definite
competitors.
Solutions.
Yeah.
Not competitors. I think there's solutions. But the one thing that still I don't really know how to solve is that element of transaction and authenticity, because I think that is very difficult to scale. So it's kind of like the whole Spotify thing, right? Where every single transaction incurs a cost because you need to verify it. Well, just like every play has like a cost, right?
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a way to make this a lot cheaper. And there's a lot of options that are probably not ready for prime time, but I think are popping up where the fees are much lower. Yeah. But those are also very general. Like I think, well, I mean, this is sort of, I hate to take it there, but there are a lot of token projects that are doing decentralized marketplaces.
You take every conversation to this point.
Well, I'm just saying, like, the thing that doesn't inherently protect Grailed is that they aren't the kind of key holders of trust, right? Yeah. Whereas like in StockX or GOAT, like they are the ones putting down resources to authenticate.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the part that I'm curious about.
What is the conclusion to be drawn here?
I think that there's going to be several potential pathways that could be drawn up from where Grailed could go from here on out. And as you can tell, I'm like kind of like drawing all my words because I'm trying to deliberate in my head. I think on the one hand, it'll probably just continue on its path because I think at scale, you're just generally going to have to appeal to more and more people. Like you'll probably lose some of that community aspect where before it was very tightly curated. Only the most passionate were selling on Grailed. But as witnessed through some of the murmurs, like I think the people that are really passionate about clothing and fashion beyond the hype, they're looking for other options.
I think the conclusion I'm going to draw from this piece of news is if 15 million is able to be raised, because I think it's a lot of money. And I think it's important. Otherwise, we would have talked about Grailed earlier. If that much money exists to go into the solution Grailed provides, then that money exists for similar solutions and better solutions. So I think what is interesting to look out for, because we've been talking a lot about how Grailed could be better, is it possible for a new, more nimble company to see the way that they've done things and decide, actually, we have an alternative?
I just don't know if money solves the problems that I had sort of
That's what I was saying, is that the money is just proof that there is room, that there is a market for other people. in this realm. Also, it's so weird that you would say that money doesn't solve it, because I feel like we talk about money solving things all the time.
No, it does, but like money doesn't solve culture. Do you know what
I mean?
Do you know what I mean? How do you basically you need to
I can't believe we were trying to close up, and then here you are just ripping another hole.
No, money can definitely solve something, but I think that it can't change social fabric, like the way things are laid out.
I think that it's not money changes culture, but that money leads to people who work to change the culture.
But that's the thing, is like a marketplace inherently needs buyers and sellers. The scale in which you operate, you need to bring those people in. So I think that
I know, but you can bring people in and then encourage a certain type of behavior. I know that that's hard to scale, but that's what needs to be done.
Yeah. So let's put it this way. In closing, whatever solution arises needs to solve the culture of lowballing. Like, how would you remove that? Secondly, the matter of authenticity. Thirdly, cost is relatively expensive, as per some people's comments. I'm trying to think, there's a fourth one that I had. I'm not sure if I remember.
I don't really see cost as a problem, but continue.
Well, like, it's relatively expensive.
But that's what the nature of the products are.
No, like the transaction costs.
Oh,
Sorry.
fees, cost of fees. Got it.
Sorry. And then I think, you obviously need quality items.
I think the last 3 minutes is a fine enough conclusion. And if we just continue, it will devolve into more disagreement.
All right. Move on.
To open up my topic for this week, I want to ask you if you have your CV.
No.
Do you have a CV?
No.
You really don't have like a PDF on hand?
Why would I need a CV?
I don't know. Don't people have those things ready?
Think about, I was at Hypebeast for 8.5 years, and then would I give a CV to Alex? Like,
darn, that totally, you just ruined my opening activity, which was we were going to trade CVs and comment on each other.
I honestly think I was like maybe solicited once or twice for a job at Hypebeast, and I think I tried once just because someone told me to.
What do you mean?
Like, someone asked if I wanted to try to get a job somewhere else. I think it was like MTV or something.
Did you have to send a CV?
Yeah. But I don't know where that CV is.
This is kind of crazy that I'm picking a subject on which you're actually not even personally. You have looked. Okay.
I have to look.
Let me introduce it. Now that our opening activity is moot. It's nice that the creative publication based out of the UK has this annual series. This is actually the 10th year that they've run this annual series called The Graduates, which is supported by their sister company, Lecture in Progress. Lecture in Progress offers advice and insight into creative work and careers. And what The Graduates is actually this contest that they run, and it's open to applicants who are fresh grads from around the world, and they select creatives that they think are outstanding, and then they interview them, feature them on the site, give them advice. So in conjunction with the contest, they've been running this series of articles that cover topics like how to put your portfolio together, how to put a CV together, whether or not you do postgraduate school. And the one that we shared yesterday in the briefing was how can you make your CV, or it wasn't necessarily like these are the rules to follow, but top creatives were interviewed to show it's nice that their CVs and to offer some advice on how to make a CV successful, to be impactful. And it's interesting because actually everyone did a good job of finding people with different views on this subject. Like actually some of them give contradicting views. So one person says, really stresses being humble and not being arrogant. And another person says, you should brag, just straight up. Like she said, brag. So, and I'm not saying either any of these people are like right or wrong. I think it's just different approaches. When I opened, I asked you if I could see your CV.
My CV would be really boring.
While you do not have one, you have looked at very many.
I guess my CV now is my LinkedIn. I think that's like the modern CV almost.
Well, it's nice that also traffics specifically in creative jobs,
Yes.
right? So it's not just about the content of the CV, like 08 to 2010, but also about how it's designed, how you are
I thought that was
displaying
really
it.
cool. I think this whole feature is really cool. Everyone's listening to this podcast right now, so you can't really see it. But if you look at the way everyone's sort of gone about designing it, I have to say I haven't received anything nearly up to this standard.
Well, these are also people at the very top of their fields.
Correct.
Yes. I mean, I can describe some of them. Like one of them is this bright yellow and it has these 3D modeled graphics on it. All of them are quite creative, essentially. Like they have included pictures of their work and the typography is very strong. But I was going to ask you, what do you look for when you're looking at CVs?
First and foremost, I just look at the overall legibility. That's a starting point.
Legibility as in easy to read.
Easy to read, easy to process the information. And then from there, like, I think the visual design, as is shown in these ones, I don't know if I generally look at that, but I think in general.
But what if it was really bad? Like,
yeah,
what if they did? What if they
You're
intentionally
a graphic designer and it's really
tried
bad.
to design it, but then it turned out bad?
I mean, that would definitely have some sort of influence for sure.
Yeah.
You can't really look past that. I would say if you're a graphic designer, then you probably naturally are inclined to create something a little bit more, up to a certain level.
I have actually also looked at my fair share of CVs, which, by the way, stands for curriculum vitae, and which, is it Americans call it resumes?
Resumes, yeah.
Yeah. Back when I was hiring at Hypebeast, and I have seen some very badly designed ones. My favorite is this one that I think looked like a Dragon Ball Z avatar. Like they drew themselves, their portrait, but in this sort of Dragon Ball Z kind of way and put it on the CV.
I do recall some CVs where people gave themselves rankings.
Yes! This drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Like rankings and skills. Another subject that came up in the article was the language you use to say good things about yourself. Because would you agree that the CV is not the place to be to undersell?
It's tough because there's a sense of skepticism, right? That you generally carry. There should be sort of like if this person said they did this, maybe we'll dial it back, 2 levels. I personally think like that. And the CV is really your foot in the door in hopes of you getting an interview. I'm interested, for your perspective, how unique do you think the CV needs to be in this day and age?
Do you mean in terms of design? Or okay.
Color, like even the fact that, some of these are colored, right? Traditionally, CVs are...
And some people
white.
say this as well in their answers, that as a creative, what weighs much more heavily than a CV is your portfolio. If someone had a super outstandingly designed CV, but a weaker portfolio vs a candidate with a very strong portfolio and a normal, like just a regular CV, then I'd still go with a strong portfolio person. But like, let's say 2 candidates are even, then I think the CV does make an impact in terms of first impression. Like that's where it has the most weight, is when someone's first looking at, like first reviewing your application before they've seen your portfolio. If you had limited time, this is my advice. If you had limited time as a creative and you're working on putting your CV and your portfolio and your cover letter together, I'd spend way much more time on the portfolio and then the cover letter and then the CV. Yeah. Like that is the order in which I would put your time.
I also wonder like how important that document is. Like, for example, could you pitch someone in a more innovative way? Instead of a CV, this is my Instagram CV. You know what I mean? Like,
But I think the content in it is still necessary. And this goes back to what I was saying about how easy or hard is it to say good things about yourself, because I think it is meaningful to list achievements. Especially for creatives, it could be very factual. Like, I had solo shows in 2012, 13, 14. Like, that's impactful. And maybe that would be hard for me to find online on my own. I mean, the people in this article, to answer your question, they went both sides. They were like, just be simple and readable. Like you said, just legible. That's enough. And then another person was like, no, you should be pushing the fold, like be unconventional. So I think it also really depends on what personality you have as a creative and where you are applying to. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary if you had more than one design CV. Like, let's say you are trying to apply to this, I don't know, avant-garde studio that only does small artsy projects, then probably you want to match that.
Let's kind of turn it around. If you're going to look at 3,000 CVs in a week, what type of CV would you prefer to look at?
Oh my goodness. If I have to look at 3,000, I just want them all to be big black text on white paper.
So you don't even care about the design of that?
Well, if I have to look at 3,000, then
like you wouldn't think that maybe this one that's a little bit more unique, the other ones would be a little bit more
I think in that situation where I was looking at a high volume, which for small studios I doubt is the case, then getting the information quickly and easily is the most important. And it would be CVs that slowed me down that would frustrate me.
And do you have an expectation of where everything should be laid out in a CV? Like names at the top, followed by contact address. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. In terms of content, I've actually also helped some people design theirs and gave some advice on what you should include.
Did they get the job?
I don't know about this one. I think something that used to be a trend was including like personality things. Like, these are my hobbies. Like, I play tennis. I don't think that is useful.
Really?
Do you think it's useful?
I think it's definitely useful.
What jumps out to you when you look at a CV?
I remember I looked at someone's CV and one of their interests was brewing kombucha, and it just stuck out.
Okay.
Because I think that's the one thing is, if you're a graphic designer, I just want to know like what else you're into.
That's interesting. But I mean, you and I are different people, as this podcast has established. Checking out in person in particular because of the visual references.
From your perspective, maybe you can leave with one sort of tip or insight that you feel is important for a CV. Something
I include on my CVs that I don't see often is an objective, which will change for a creative over time. And I like to put it right at the top after your name and contact information. Charisse is looking for a small studio that does collaborative work and is interested in exploring editorial in relation to illustration or something like that, which makes it really obvious to me whether you are the right candidate for a job beyond your experiences.
My take would be, I like it when people take the initiative and try to provide an immediate solution to something they deem to be not so good about the company they're coming into. If that
That's
makes
more
sense.
of a cover letter thing.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at them all the same. Just like if you're applying for a job.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like, I think that's one thing that immediately cuts through the noise, because if someone has sort of the audacity, and I say that in a very sort of positive way, of providing value to your company, then it cuts through the noise for sure, because it shows that you first and foremost understand the company, and secondly, you have a point of view. I don't even think it matters if you're right or wrong, because they're obviously not privy to all the information internally. So they're just using sort of an outward perspective.
I like that. Actually, if we're talking about the entire application process,
all right,
this is what I have. Do not include attachments. I do not want a CV or a portfolio attachment, and I'm ready to bet that most other people don't either.
When
Please
you say that, you
send it
mean
as a link.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Even the CV, like for myself as well, when I do send it out occasionally, sorry, I'm not leaving you, but occasionally people ask for it. It's a Dropbox link.
Interesting.
In my portfolio, I'll send either the website or also a Dropbox link to a PDF portfolio. Yeah. Please don't I don't think creatives need their inboxes blown up any further.
I'm actually the other way, because I feel like links get broken, things get moved, and they sort of become antiquated.
Huh. Well, maybe the real takeaway from this, because you and I have disparate views, is get to know the person who you are hoping to employ you.
That was my other point
and
too.
Try to serve their needs.
Yeah. Got it.
That's a good place to finish things off.
Yes. I need to take a nap after this. I woke up at like 4 a.m.
No, I know. It's just funny how desperate you are. If you are interested in hearing more about MAEKAN and reading or listening to our stories that are focused on the sights and sounds of creative culture, visit us at maekan.com, MAEKAN.com.
You can also subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and platforms. And if you like this podcast, do us a huge favor by reviewing us on iTunes or sharing this with a friend. I'm Eugene.
I'm Charisse.
And this is Making It Up.